Bonjour, bienvenue à tous.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Bénédicte Tassard. I'm a journalist for RTL. I'm in charge of European issues, and I'm very happy to welcome you for this panel of the Rencontre Économique d'Aix, which you can follow on the internet, on YouTube, on RTL as well. I would like to remind those who are here present that they have to wear their face mask. I'm sorry about that. Is it not too late when faced with China and the Americans? Has the technological race changed? So remotely we will have Ulf Fersen with us. You're Vice President in charge of telecoms at Ericsson and Vice Chairman, Government and Industrial Relationship. We have with us Jack Eichenbroich here, Chairman and CEO of Valeo, Cyril Garcia from Gemini, who are specialists of the digital transformation of companies, Stéphane Israel, CEO of Arianespace, and Anne-Marie Engtoft Larsen, Tech Ambassador for Denmark. Good morning, all, but let's listen to Lionel Fontaine from the Cercle des Économistes. Thank you and good morning. Is Europe still in this technological race? I guess you're impatient to know the answer, but I'm not going to give you that answer. I'll let our panelists talk about it. But to start with, this technological race between the US and China has increased. There has been a commercial war since 2018, mainly based on the value chain and extending to technological companies, telephones. And I think that the Biden administration is not going to change anything to that situation. So there are obviously issues for the EU with the extraterritoriality, and the EU has rediscovered its dependence to American technology and the Chinese market. And when you're right in the middle of that dependence, it becomes rather complex. So we'll answer 5 questions. One about the objective, one about the method, the means, the paradigm, and maybe about the geostrategy if we have time. So in a few words, objectives or goals. What technology do we want to master? We have biotechs, connected vehicles, space. So it's quite a lot and a much too long list in view of our limited means. And still, we must maintain our advance where we have advanced, like aeronautical area, and we'll hear about that. Obviously, we constantly hear there must be a cooperation between the academia and the companies, but the issue is the role we give to the state, the role devoted to public subsidies in this race, especially in view of the Chinese competition, which is not necessarily waging its competition in the same way with Europe and the US. Paradigm-wise, the policy of competition, which can be either parallel or against the policy that we have. And if Google were German, for example, would the Europeans want to dismantle Google? That's one of the questions in terms of paradigm. And in terms of geostrategy, and we'll talk about that. Who are our natural partners? At what scale should we work? Should we work at European scale? Should we work with our American friends, despite the few issues and that we've had at technological level recently with them? Should we work with our Chinese friends, with our Indian friends? We're going to have to decide to give priority to a number of partnerships. And in view of the dependence with American technology and Chinese market, it's going to be a complicated thing. Thank you very much. Thank you for those who are following on the web. You can ask your questions. We will have some time for Q&A at the end, so don't hesitate to ask questions. Jacques Aschenbroich from Valeo, while preparing for this panel, you said you would speak freely. Well, I always speak freely. In the title, we have 3 words that are important: Europe, race, and technological. So I'm going to look at things in a reverse order. Let's start with the race. It is a true race. There are technological evolutions at present as we've never seen in the past. In my work, whether it be autonomous cars or driverless cars, etc., but also for COVID with messenger RNA for in space, but you'll hear that from my colleague, and chips, and time has really sped up. So that's a real race. As far as technology is concerned, I've always had trouble with technology, and we invested 5 billion for assisted driving, DS as it's called, and for all its users. When we talk about technology, we tend to forget luxury. It's incredible. And if you look at the number of patents deposited by Amazon, they have only very few, so it's a question of uses there. So you have to look at what technology means, and we have to be able to be good at technological level, but also at usage level. And there's something that's important at present, and it has nothing to do with COVID. It's what we talk about French Tech or the unicorns in Europe. Last year, 45 billion were invested in startup companies in Europe. That's 1/3 of what the US invested and half what China invested. So it's new, and it's a great source of hope. So Europe. 3rd word. And that's where I'm going to speak up. I feel that Europe is not in the race in terms of help. When you look at the DARPA in the US, they're cashing billions. I don't think we got a cent from Europe, and it's extremely complex, and the same goes for other jobs. And you have to work in ecosystems. You have to work with our worst competitors like Bosch, Continental, or others. It's absurd. I'll never work with them. We compete on all tendering processes. We compete on technologies. And so if the prerequisite for the European intervention is to work in an ecosystem like a Europe of batteries, for example, no, there's no Europe of batteries. There were subsidies for a number of projects with Total, with Elvision. There were projects with Northvolt. Companies have presented projects, but there's no real ecosystem for a battery. But Brussels has accepted to subsidize some projects, but they are corporate projects. I would dream to have the same subsidies for and the same investments in terms of R&D in our plants. Thank you. Anne-Marie Engtoft Larsen, do you believe in a European Silicon Valley?
Thank you so much to be here today. There's literally technology all around us. It's in my ears, it's in my hands. And so the question, do I believe in a European Silicon Valley? I think the question is right now, where is it? And that's what I'm, I think excited to hear also from these esteemed gentlemen here today. There's no doubt that even in Europe, technologies is encompassing all of our lives. It's encompassing all of our industries, but it's much more than just economic and innovation. It is increasingly becoming geopolitical. And that's why when we talk about whether Europe is still in the technological race, this is not only a matter of who is producing what services, what products. It's much more a question of who gets ahead in the geopolitical race, who is approaching this from a strategic point of view, and it's much more on the question of where will Europe be in the future, how will we be self-determined, and how will we secure a strong, independent Europe that is still very much engaged and interacting with the rest of the world. I think when we look a bit on the challenging side, Europe needs to do better. It needs to do more to compete and to do that even better than it is doing today. The Commission's recent communication on the digital decade describes some of these issues, and I think just to highlight a few and why we are still some time away from a European Silicon Valley. One is we simply do not have enough ICT specialists. By the projections that we're going to need about 20 million experts in 2030, that's 9 years from now, we don't even have about 9 million. The projections is going to show we're going to miss 5 to 6 million ICT specialists. Secondly, there is a gap on high-end computer chips, and I think the question of establishing production of that is not a matter of months and years, but thinking through long-term how we're going to build strong ecosystems industrial around this. And then finally, too often I meet amazing European startups that end up in Silicon Valley where I live. We're really good at creating startups in Europe, but not necessarily very good at scaling them up and creating these long-term, big, influential technological companies. So what can we do? I think a lot is already being done politically, but this is a matter of not only politicians and capitals in Brussels can take these decisions. This is really also up to collaboration with industry, with startups, with the phenomenal European tech companies. While we might have lost on the business-to-consumer side for the first round, I think the second half of the match is still very much an opportunity for Europe to play into. And maybe just ending on 2 points. One is there is a great opportunity for Europe in not only strengthening our internal market, but creating this a strong position in the world. Right now, the rivalry between East and West, where Europe is, if not forgotten, at least it's squeezed in the middle. How do we position a strong Europe? That also means that we, on digital foreign policy as Europeans, need to be part of setting the global norms and standards, promoting European innovation and European solution where technology builds on European values. And finally, help set the governance. This is also about developing in emerging markets and an opportunity for European approach of digitization. And just finally, so this is a bit of a bleak outcome. Are we competitive enough? Is Europe, ahead in the race? We might be a little bit behind, but history is a great reminder that Europe has everything it takes. We invented the first industrial revolution. The spinning jenny came out of Europe. It's not just a matter of creating textiles. That was the foundation for the first industrial revolution. We also invented the labor policies that took children out of production. So good regulation on technologies and innovation can go hand in hand. It was in Europe that a man was clever enough to reimagine something better than the horse, and we invented the car. So Europe can still get far away in this, and I think get ahead, but it is a matter of joining forces on all of this now. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So the race is not lost. You're somewhat optimistic. Cyril Garcia, do you think that there's many fights to be fought? Well, there are fights to be won. Some of them are lost. We've been talking a lot over the past years about the lost ones. So when you want to win your fight, you have to have political objectives, and that's our conviction at Capgemini. You have to lead societal fights that will assemble people. The first one being environment and energy transition, and that's a vital one. In Europe, we have a lot of potential. We have patents, we have initiatives. Recently, we carried out research, sorry about that, for the Gates Fund, about 55 technologies that will enable Europe to reach its objective by 2050 of net zero. So we, in transport, good energy, we have the potential, we have patents, but we have needs for funds. The important thing is that the link between these technological topics and the political parties is there. Some European political parties have seized this article to define their roadmap. Then you have all the possibilities given by 5G with the edge computing issue that makes you closer to the users and uses that will enable connected cars, fighting aircrafts or hospitals to be more efficient. There is infrastructures, safer infrastructures, more efficient remote infrastructure, and the carbon footprint. But would you say we're on time or are we running late? Well, answer, as we were saying, as Jacques was saying, it's a race. We're running behind, but have we lost or have we won? It's too early to say. The important thing is that Europe has three main pillars: Thierry Breton, Mrs. Verstegen, and the Commissary for Innovation and Research. They have a consistent speech. Sometimes you have overlaps, as Jean-Hervé Lorenzi would say. Some are quite revealing, but you have toolboxes, you have ambitions, and you have money. Okay, less than in China, less than in the US, but the dynamic is there. And to me, the central point, which is not talked about sufficiently, is that you have major European technological leaders that are supporting this. They have changed. They haven't all integrated the alliance logic. In our business, by nature, we're, as Karim would say, we're close to competition. So these alliances enables a federation of the best, and all these actors. Ericsson is going to speak in a minute. Bosch, sorry, Jacques just mentioned them. Capgemini are looking at and funding some areas like batteries, hydrogen, AI. It's true that the European Commissar is promoting this logic of alliance, and it is virtuous, but it shouldn't take place only between companies that have an equity of over 30 billion. It must include startup companies. This word, which sent everybody laughing 8 years ago, is leading to consistent solutions now. We've done it for health with Orange, Sanofi, and Generali. It's a virtuous policy because, as Jacques was saying, this way you can challenge Europe about the funds, about the scopes, about the action plans. We more or less all speak the same language, and it's the start of a nice story. Thank you very much. Let's turn our eyes towards the sky. Stéphane Israël, we're expecting a lot from you because when we talk about Ariane Espace, we talk a lot about your competitors in the private world. Are you still in the race? Well, in any case, to use two words that were just mentioned, we are in a race and in a fight, and I believe these two words are true. First thing I'd like to say, why is space important and why should we be present in this race? When you look at the main challenges of the 21st century, security, climate, connectivity, dream is important in a society that sometimes has negative pulsions. So security, connectivity, climate, and dream, this is something where space is going to give you more and more solutions. For example, there was an encounter between the American and French space heads. There is climate, for example. We can organize and monitor the climate variance from the space. And we know that Thomas Pesquet is in the air, in the space, and it's great. So how is the landscape? The landscape is changing now. In the US, there has been a kind of triple revolution, so to say. mobilization of public money in the US, which is about 5 times more important than European public money, has led to the emergence of private actors with tens of billions of dollars. So at one point, NASA decided no longer to intervene and to do things themselves, but to buy services. And this was the story of SpaceX. So there was also the encounter of a world that used to live in the space world with the actors of the digital world and the ability of funding of the Silicon Valley. And if you look at these parameters, now we are faced with a major competitor, SpaceX, that also builds cars. And they're working now not only for the reusable rocket, but also they are a vertical company, meaning they build satellites, launch them, operate them, and 500 kilometers above your head, they're sending every 2 weeks 160 satellites. So if Europe does not react very quickly, we could end up very soon with a dominance of this actor. So I'm not going to take too much of your time, but what can Europeans do? We are a space power. We're the third one behind in terms of funding behind the US and China. We have very powerful actors, whether it be for satellites, satellite operators, or launchers with Arianespace. But it's true that we too must take a number of initiatives to remain in the race. Sorry to interrupt, but do you have a vertical model as well? Well, one sure thing is we need 4 or 5 mobilizations. Europe has to assume the fact that they are European. The Americans are Americans, the Chinese are Chinese, the Russians are Russians. And I will say that again. So we have to assume the fact that we're Europeans. So I'm saying this because China tends to take over from Russia in this race for space. We need to buy European. We need a coalescence of our forces around our actors. We need major projects. It used to be called the industrial policy. It used to be called the major programs, projects. In the US, they spend billions for that. In Europe, we haven't got that much money. Mr. Breton wants the emergence of a European constellation. We need rules, and we can't let the US keep the normative monopoly. The lower orbit is almost saturated. There are challenges as far as frequencies are concerned. We need Europe to be there. We need more cohesion between industrial actors and public policies. And let me finish with by saying that we need a European DARPA. We need public policies to further innovation and make us a bit more free. Thank you very much.
Pour Ericsson, est-ce que vous sentez aussi
Person for Ericsson, do you feel this huge need? Well, we have talked about strategic autonomy, especially with 5G. Do you feel this need for a common European mobilization?
Bonjour.
Yes, good morning. I'm happy to be with you this morning. Unfortunately, I cannot be present in flesh.
And I will talk about 5G and coming also to your question there, Benedict. But 5G, of course, being the 5th generation of mobile technologies. And in this space, European companies are definitely leading the global 5G technology race, but Europe is not. So what are the reasons for that, and what is now required for Europe to catch up? Well, 5G is now launched around the world as we speak, and there are more than 130 live networks on all continents. And the leading countries and regions for 5G are, however, not primarily found in Europe, although there are some exceptions. Instead, the leading 5G markets are in North America, in the Middle East, Australia, and East Asia, South Korea, Japan, and China in particular. So where is Europe on 5G? Well, Europe is very much contributing to these advanced markets via Ericsson, but also Nokia, supplying world-class 5G technology. And Ericsson is actually the global market and technology leader in 5G, contributing to more than 80 live 5G networks on all continents, ahead of all the competition. And in all of the pioneering 5G markets in North America or in East Asia, Ericsson is contributing. And we are, of course, we're a global company, but we have a very strong European base. 60% of our R&D, the 4 billion euros we spend every year, is spent in Europe, including in France. And we also produce 5G products in Europe for the European market. But Europe, as I said, is falling behind in 5G uptake compared to North America and East Asia, including also then adding also the Middle East. So does this matter? Yes, it is serious. Not primarily for us in Ericsson or for Nokia, because we are in the global market, but it matters for European innovation and competitiveness, because 5G is primarily, as we heard also today, about connecting enterprises and things, the Internet of Things, IoT. And when industries are now digitizing in East Asia and North America, they are gaining in competitiveness through smart manufacturing based on 5G. But it's not only in smart manufacturing that 5G will bring benefits, it's also in smart agriculture, it's healthcare, it's learning, etc. And we have, together with Analysis Mason, showed that to establish full 5G across the European Union, that would bring 250 billion euros of benefits to the EU economy, primarily through smart factories, but also smart agriculture, and also fixed wireless access, which is actually cost-efficient complement to fiber. But there will also be environmental benefits from this. So why is it that Europe is not up to speed on 5G? Well, the main reason is the lack of spectrum, the radio frequencies needed for operators like Orange or Vodafone to launch their networks. So we have been late in opening up these frequency bands. So the call is to governments and regulators to free up the spectrum as soon as possible on investment-friendly conditions. But Europe's program for coming out of the COVID-19 economic crisis is also focusing on digitalization, rightly so. 20% of funds should be spent on digitalization. So now here also is the call to government is to make good use and efficient intelligence use of these funds to speed up 5G, especially for rural areas, benefiting agriculture, but also for industries and including startups that we heard about. Because 5G is basically an innovation platform on which European companies, especially I would say startups, will be able to build globally successful applications. And important to stress also that digital and green transformation, they go hand in hand. We have successfully shown in Ericsson that 5G is more energy efficient than previous technologies, and we can also actually reduce the total energy footprint of our technologies. And when you talk about technology sovereignty, I think it's important to recognize that we are strong in some sectors in Europe, including in mobile. The United States, North America are strong in others. I think we should not aim to build champions on each side competing directly. I think we need to find ways of cooperating, and especially, I think, looking to the future, also in development of 6G, because we need to ensure that there is a strong sort of Western 6G ecosystem when that is being launched maybe 10 years from now or so.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Now,
If you don't mind, we're going to take questions, whether on the website or in the room.
Good morning. I'm a teacher and a researcher. We talked about public money. There are two issues that we haven't covered yet. One is the tax lever or fiscal lever. People leave because the fiscal conditions are not good. Also the training system. We know that we will train millions of people in new technologies, in the digital sector, in artificial intelligence. I think we have to take the youth today at 15 years of age to train them. You need a generation. Do you have concrete ideas? Do you train people? We look at Germany, for example. We should have had a round table on that. Can you shed a light on this, on these two sectors that seem to be essential, fiscal conditions and training? Enough, Ms. Larsen, you talked a lot about training. Is there, what are your initiatives? Do you have initiatives in your sectors, in your respective sectors, to train this new generation? Yes, madam.
Exactly a question around skills in Europe. As I was saying before, we're going to need ICT specialists. This is not only a matter of young people getting the right education, but it is looking throughout the entire labor market. And maybe just adding a point on skills, this is much more than just creating technologies in Europe. I think this is a fundamental question around our democratic institutions, the way of systems that we prefer in Europe. So educating ICT specialists, it's about preserving democratic, responsible technological development, the institutions they underpin, the democracies that was born in Europe. So when we look at ICT skills, I think we should see it as a way of supporting the country, supporting the institutions, supporting the democracy that we can't take for granted anymore in Europe.
Monsieur Persson, aussi pour les télécoms.
Mr. Persson, for telecoms, do you also have, do you have initiatives to train this new generation, this youth? Mr. Persson? Mr. Persson? Are you with us? No, Mr. Garcia. Here is Mr. Persson.
Okay.
Je vous écoute, je vous écoute.
Yeah, definitely we are training both our own staff. Obviously, we have almost, well, I think 40,000 highly educated staff in Europe. But I agree that there is a skills gap in Europe, and I think it's both about ensuring that we guarantee the skills for our own populations, and that is a major task, I mean, for the companies, but also for the public sector, obviously. But I think we should also make sure we have an open labor market, because we need to attract global talent also, as we do in Ericsson. I mean, just where I'm sitting now in Stockholm, we have 100 nationalities working in our R&D team here in Stockholm. So I think Europe needs to be open also to bring and make Europe attractive for global talent.
Monsieur Garcia, est-ce qu'on a les formations assez...
Mr. Garcia, do we have qualifying? Oh, no, I let the fiscal topic out to Anne-Marie. But on training, it's essential, vital. We are the first hirer in the digital world. If we don't have planned factories to train the youth, I'm sorry for the expression, but it's at the heart of our processes. And if I look at the future on these topics, we are new intermediaries. We take the place of training institutions as companies. We hire a lot of people. We recruit a lot of people. A lot of people leave us after a year or two, considering that they got training thanks to their work in our company. So it's essential. It's a vital investment. And in my introductory comments, I insisted on these European leaders because they all have to do it. They're forced to do it. It's this dynamic that leads to the fact that today you have thousands of young Europeans who, after the end of their studies as engineers in engineering, they got additional experience enabling them to evolve. And another topic is, how do you keep these people in France and in Europe? Today we are committed to a race for training with investments that have never been made in the previous years. No microphone. No microphone. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Nobody can hear you. Yes. Okay. To say that you need to train, do some training, we've heard that for 50 years now. I have a direct question. I've lived in Germany. I've lived in Russia. I know how it works there. Are you for creating an additional mammoth, but creating at the level of the regions training centers via the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, enterprises, technical high schools, and then you would have a private-public system, or you need to innovate. You know, you have to go fast, because if we don't do this in 5 years, we're done. Regions, or even at the European level, we're talking, no. This is a real question. When I look at the difference between the moment I was trained in engineering schools, unfortunately, a few decades ago, and today, the difference is the incredible development of emerging countries. There are millions of engineers that are trained and very well trained in China every year. There are millions of engineers that are incredibly well trained in India. And we also have a software business in Egypt, and we see there that there's an incredible potential for engineer training. So this war, this battle, and this race is essential at the level of businesses, but also at the level of training the states. We can't replace the training that is ensured by schools and universities. You know, the public authorities must understand that training is an essential element to ensure the competitiveness of our country. And it's not the case yet, is it? Not really. You look at, I'm the president of the École des Mines Engineering School, and the evolution of budgets granted to the École des Mines Engineering School is not at the level of the ambitions, our ambition. So we have a real issue. The businesses play their role. They invest a lot of money in their training activities, and it's a vector for competitiveness that is essential. Mr. Israel. Well, in our sector, the market is not totally globalized since they are industries that are very close to our sovereignty. It's not obvious for the different nationalities to export. You know, our industry employ first as a priority European or French engineers. From my side, I don't think we have a problem on that side. At least the aeronautic and spatial industries have the resources in terms of engineering, which appear to be sufficient. Fiscal conditions, there's a big debate around that. No, there's a debate around the tax advantages for research, for example. But in Europe, we're not mobilized enough on public orders. The power of the US is public orders. That is, of course, encouraged by military investments. And I'll tell you that for a lot of enterprises, whether they're small, medium, or large, the public ordering system is essential for success and innovation. Any other questions? Good morning. Thank you for your presentations. I have a question to make a difference with what we have with the automobile industry and the rocket industry or the aerospace industry. You know, there's a lot of time between, you know, ideas and concrete applications, you know. Haven't we lost the race already for aerospace, for example? We have mobility, we have the cars, but in terms of the aerospace industry, the fact that we're 27 compared to what is invested in R&D, the public order, the defense budget in the U.S., very different. Isn't our system a bit too heavy? Too much red tape? Yeah, in Europe we need a lot of actors involved to make progress. It's a problem we have. The decision-making process is longer than in the U.S. It's a real barrier. But yes, we are still in the race because we have some excellent products. If you take launchers, for example, we know what to do to ensure the success of Ariane 6. We have to create the same conditions to support our launchers. We have the same as those the Americans benefit from. And if we do this, we will be absolutely competitive on the market, and we can continue to win contracts, to deploy satellites. Yes, we are in the race, but we have to accelerate, speed up our decision-making process in the European ecosystem, which is complex. Yes. In the automobile industry, we are in the race, whether for car manufacturers in Europe and the equipment manufacturers. We have the biggest activities that are based in Europe, and of course that are on international markets. You must know that this evolution was done practically without public money. It was self-financed by the enterprises themselves, by the companies themselves. And sometimes in other countries, particularly in China, there's a lot of public money involved. But Europe developed itself without public investments, with environmental standards that are incredibly stringent, which lead to the fact that the whole of the industry is now shifting at an incredible pace. Mr. Parson?
In a sector, of course, where most of the R&D also comes from the companies themselves. We receive in Europe very little support when it comes to R&D funding. But I think there is a key role for governments and in Europe, European Commission to fund pre-competitive research. And here Europe has been very successful on 3G, 4G and 5G and securing that Europe has a strong technology leadership. And we need to ensure that for the next generation as well. And of course, we need to also have a really good close cooperation with universities and make sure that we have top class, globally competitive university in Europe. And now, of course, as many of us know, I mean, US is very much in the lead when it comes to top class universities. So that is also an area where we need to strengthen.
Merci beaucoup. De toute façon, il y a encore pas mal.
Thank you. There are quite a lot of roundtables dedicated to technology if you're interested today here in X. So, Monsieur Fontaine, can you conclude, propose some conclusions? A lot was said. I think that if we want to answer to the question, is Europe still in the technological race? I say the answer is yes, but we're not ahead. We're not running ahead. We're not leading. We have very good runners, but they have stones in their pockets. They're weighed down. And so this is what we're going to have to treat, to address. But what came out of this panel was the idea that we need to give a lot of thought to technology, addressing the usages, the markets, and bear in mind that technology is also today a very geopolitical issue, it was mentioned, which means that a lot of these markets are also public markets. And so there is a genuine dimension to take into account at the European level. There are some tools that we do not have access to. We talked about by European Act. We talked about the American DARPA, talked about public orders in the US, but also elsewhere, which represent a mean for financing, a considerable financing mean, directly or indirectly. So it's by taking into account all these elements and by wondering why we don't keep startups. We were told that we had created the equivalent of 1/3 of startups created in the US, but we don't keep them. So it's all this burden, this weight that we have, and the stones in the pockets of our best runners that we will have to remove if we want to continue to be competitive in this race. Thank you very much. And the best runners, well, you had a good panel, a great panel today on this stage and in the visio mode. Thank you very much for your attention and your presence.